but let's kind of start from the beginning.
Yeah.
I want to start by introducing myself to anyone who has never joined us for a live Q&A session or who's watching the replay. I'm Gabi. I am somebody who believes that educators deserve to find joy and fulfillment in their careers. Sometimes that means that they will look for careers outside the classroom. Sometimes it means that they'll adopt practices that brings wellness to them while they're still in the classroom, right? And that is why I'm so excited to bring Cheryl. I'll talk a little bit about how we met, Cheryl, first, and then I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. But if my memory serves me well, you and I met, I want to say in December of last year, when you were growing curious about the possibility of shifting from your role in education. And you took a 5-day challenge with me because you were kind of looking for guidance. Is that correct? Am I somewhere?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about your thoughts there. What were your thoughts at the beginning? Like when this was in December, you joined the 5-day challenge. Like what was your mind like at that time? Like where were you mentally speaking,
Uh,
emotionally speaking?
Emotionally, I was stressed.
Mm.
I have to be very transparent that it's holiday time, winter break actually, and so you're contemplating like if I don't get started, when will I get started?
Yeah.
And yes, 3 years in this particular position. I'm a special educator. And
Hmm.
so I don't know. I speak to those who are, they know what it is to be in the world of a self-contained classroom, and the rigor and everything that goes with being a special educator. Not just a teacher, but you're in the field of special education. And
Hmm.
so just feeling myself like I don't think I can do this another year. Like I was
Hmm.
at that point. And so
Yeah.
of course I'm in bed, I'm scrolling through and I see Gabby's 5-day challenge. And I was like, okay, considering my unique background is not traditional educator, how I came into public
Hmm.
school education. So
Hmm.
considering my background,
Hmm.
it's your post spoke to me. And so I say, hey, what's there to lose? Signed up, and that's how we connected.
Yeah, that's initially how we connected. And I love that you kind of took us a little bit through your journey because that is something that I wanted to ask kind of as the follow-up to for us to learn more about you. So you're saying that you started your career in the classroom 3 years ago. Is that correct?
Well, no,
Or
I
has it been?
started my actually I started, I would say 8 years because I'm going into my 8th year. And
Okay.
what happened was when I wanted to get into public school education, did research and everything. I subbed for 7 months to get
Mm-hmm.
my feet wet, to,
Mm-hmm.
see where I wanted to go. Because
Hmm.
again, I come from a unique background.
Yeah.
I've been served 26 years on the corporate side. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so once that career ended due to mergers, layoffs, then
Mm.
I don't know if people heard of AmeriCorps, but AmeriCorps is a government-based program that will give you the opportunity to go out in the community, do some research, see,
Mm-hmm.
what, if you want to transition to like nonprofit. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's usually geared to younger, but hey, things have changed. So it's definitely a very diverse audience for AmeriCorps. So through AmeriCorps, I was able to work in a community. I ended up doing well and being hired as a financial literacy community educator. And so I
Mm.
got really excited about that and stayed in that for about 3 to 4 years. Out of that, I heard so many stories. People would come to me and I would sit down and counsel them through financial literacy. But a lot of people say, I did not learn this in school, like,
Oh.
and I wish I
Mhm.
could go back to school. I wish I can transition to do a different career. And so I
Mhm.
was like, okay. when I, wanted to go into public school education, that was my reasoning, the
Mhm.
stories and being able to go and maybe reach a different audience and make a different impact. So that was how I chose to transition into public school education.
Wonderful. So it actually sparked something in you working with adults in the community,
Yeah,
and learning that they had wished to have learned this in school, and you saw a gap and you said, you know what,
yeah,
let me try to fill in that gap, right?
yeah,
Okay, gotcha. Well, it's wonderful, right, to kind of understand where our hearts were coming from when we first got into the profession, because for a lot of us, right, that was the driving force, is
yeah,
wanting to make a difference. And I think for some of us, breaking up with that initial goal that we had, or that initial dreams, is what really overwhelms us in the career
oh,
shift process, right? Is we went into this wanting to change lives, wanting to support others, and leaving the profession behind sometimes feels like leaving behind that calling. And they're not both, simultaneously true. Like, you can leave the profession and still make an impact.
yeah.
But some people, are struggling with that and they choose to stay. But
Mhm.
then they're in the profession and they're barely making it, they're
Yeah,
barely going by, they're surviving, they are not thriving, right? And our teachers, if you're listening and you're an educator, you know this, right? But it's a struggle, and the
yeah.
struggle is real.
It is
So,
very real, and that's where I found myself at.
yeah.
Is questioning, like you say, it's like you breaking up with your profession.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, how did I get here? Because I'm over here and I've had this all of this corporate career,
Mhm.
nonprofit. And to look back over it, it all fits together.
Yeah.
It all brought me to this point. But yeah, the struggle is real when you find yourself questioning your calling,
Yeah.
questioning, um, yeah, definitely questioning your calling because it is a calling.
Yep.
And like I said, you find yourself like guilty because you
Mhm.
want to break up with the profession.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Which
can
feels like
definitely,
your calling. It feels like breaking
yeah,
up with a calling, and it can
yeah.
be every emotion, from feeling of
Oh,
guilt to feeling of shame to feel.
yeah.
And if you're somebody that's very hard on yourself, like, I remember I say this, and I think I might have shared this in the 5-day challenge, but I said I went through stages, kind of like you go through stages of grief, right?
Mhm.
My first stage was denial. Like, the first stage
Yeah.
that I had was, no, I can make this work. Like, it's
Mhm.
tough. Everybody warned me this was going to be a tough profession, but I'm a tough person and everything's
Yeah.
figure outable. So I'll just work on this and I'll figure it out. And what's crazy, Cheryl, is at the time that I was in the classroom, which, by the way, I left in 2015, I think 2015, 2016, I can't remember. But when I left, I do not recall ever hearing about educator wellness.
Mhm.
And right now, I work in ed tech. I support various ed tech brands. And one of the things that I try to do is connect them to decision makers, which are principals, administrators, that sort of thing. And when I ask my administrators, and I have them in Arizona, I have them in Nevada, I have them in Texas, I have administrators from all over the country, and I ask them, what's the number one priority on your list right now? A lot of them have been saying educator wellness.
Definitely.
And they're saying that we have so many shortages, more than we've ever seen in our history. They're common, right? But
Mhm.
you're talking about hundreds, sometimes thousands of people leaving from districts. And I think it's starting to catch on, right? That
Yes.
something's got to change. So let's go back to the initial story. We were talking about how you and I met. You joined the 5-day challenge because your mind was fixed on considering leaving the profession. But then
Yes.
something happened, right? I stopped hearing from you guys in the private LinkedIn group, and I was like, what is happening? We had a lot of energy in the beginning. How's your journey looking like? So I did a check-in with each of you individually to, I sent private DMs to each of you, like, hi, where are you at? Like, how can I be a support? And it's interesting, Cheryl, because you weren't the only one that kind of told me that they revisited the whole idea of leaving and decided, they wanted to stay.
Mhm.
And you specifically told me, Gabby, I went through this program, right? And it was life changing, and it made me kind of fall in love with the profession again. And Cheryl, I was like, we need to bring her here, because regardless of whether people have chosen to stay in the profession or continue, I think that the tips that you can share with us today are going to help regardless of where they decide to go next. So tell us a little bit about when your mind started shifting to the possibility of staying in the system. Like, what happened? Tell me a little bit
You
more.
said something very interesting about grief, because we think in grief it's just somebody, a loved one passing away, and we're grieving love, but we grieve a lot of things. We grieve relationship changes like divorce. We grieve a decision to leave teaching.
Yeah.
And so yes, that's where I was at, was a grieving process. And how you get through the grieving process is you trust your circle of friends, of
Mhm.
family. You seek out what can help me heal. And so
Mhm.
that's how I
Yeah.
found Breathe for Change. It was like, I don't know, it kept popping up in my social media feed. And so I'm one of those persons that, hey, why? So I go
Mhm.
research it. And I'm like, okay, I sit with the research. I mean, and the things were phenomenal.
Mhm.
And so it was, of course, yoga based, and I have
Mhm.
done yoga on and off through the years. And so this year, I was very intentional about doing it with my students. And so I teach students with autism and
Mhm.
ADHD. And
Mhm.
so one of the things is movement in the classroom. How do we bring that in? We need more of that. How do we
Mhm.
bring that healing piece and
Mhm.
and that social emotional piece into the classroom? And Breathe
Yeah.
for Change introduced me to what I already had in my mind.
Mhm. Okay.
It was like a missing piece. And so
Mhm.
once I found Breathe for Change, which I said is an organization geared towards specifically educators, and they bring into that social emotional piece. They bring into that educator wellness. It starts with us first. The
Mhm.
healing has to start with us first.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the calmness, that the energy we bring into the classroom.
Mhm.
We can't
Mhm.
do that if we are stressed
Yeah.
ourselves, and we can't do that if we are unhealed ourselves. So when I started this, and I'm still on the journey, it is a year-long journey. It is a 200-hour program.
Mhm.
You can become a yoga instructor,
Mhm.
which I will be at the end, but you're
Mhm.
also getting certified in what's called a SELF, which is social emotional learning facilitator. It's not just
Ah.
for the classroom. If you're a nonprofit, if you're seeking to
Mhm.
work like principals, administrators, they are in this program as well.
Mhm.
And so
Wow.
it is a phenomenal program. So if you get a chance, you can provide the link, Gabby. But
Yeah.
it is definitely it changed me. It began the healing process for me.
And oh my goodness, Cheryl, you're giving us so many jewels of information here. And one thing that stood out that you mentioned, right, is having to first heal ourselves. And
Yeah,
I think that was the most challenging thing for me, because as educators, we're constantly pouring onto others. And
yeah,
it's expected, right? It's expected. It's always think of the children. Like, the children come first,
yeah.
no matter what. But what
Not yeah.
happens what happens when the vessel is empty, right? The vessel does get empty. We're not this miraculous fountain unless, you know, we have found the truth of where the fountain is. Like,
If you
we
can
we might.
show me where that's at.
Yes, disclose it for me, please. Somebody unmute themselves. Tell me where this is at. But most of us, I mean, regardless of where we get our source of energy from, the truth is education and being constantly in the grind of day in, day out, the demands of education can leave you feeling like you have no energy left to give.
Mhm.
And I love that, because I used to support a company, wonderful company. Maybe some of y'all have heard of it, called Frog Street Press. And we had a social emotional learning curriculum within it. And one of the practices that we always talked about was, you cannot give a skill that you do not have. So
Oh,
let's right? You cannot give a skill that you do not have. So for some of us in education, right, when we're talking about um, our classroom management, let's say, right, some
Yeah.
of us can tend to have like an authoritative type of approach to classroom management. Some of us might have a restorative practice type of approach to classroom management, but a lot of that has to do with what's in here. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember my teachers who were authoritative teachers, that would be, they would say they wanted to be restorative, but they were authoritative. And they'd say, well, how do I get there? And I'd say, well, we cannot give a skill that we don't have. So we have to first learn that skill, right? So I would say, think about this. Have you ever looked at a student, and I think we've all been guilty of this, and been like, calm down. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, let's look at our expression, like, calm down. Like, we're transmitting, like, this is calm. And
Yeah.
that isn't calm, right? We have to first, we have to model what calm means. But when we are so thin on calm internally,
Mm-hmm.
how can we be calm with others? Cheryl, tell us. I mean, you took this course. You took this course to help breathe for change, right? We're trying to look within to restore what's here so that we can then practice restorative healing within ourselves, with our students, with our management. What did you learn? What's something you want to share today for others to take away and learn? Like, what can you
Um,
tell us?
Definitely what I always what I want to share, what I learned is again, it goes back to um recognizing the state that you're in
Okay,
and being
perfect.
honest, being transparent and honest with yourself that it is a grief process and we are allowed to feel those emotions. I think
Yes.
what it is that when we don't give ourselves permission to go through the process.
Yeah.
And I myself have been through losing a mother, suddenly losing a young brother, losing a marriage, just a number of things. But I think what we do is we find ourselves holding our breath and we don't breathe. And that is
Yeah.
one of the first things that they teach us in the
Mm-hmm.
programs is to settle ourselves, to take 3 collective breaths, like it's a correct way to breathe. I always teach my students that you want to put your hand here, put your another hand on there, and feel yourself breathing. Take in the breath through your nose and let it out through your mouth, teaching them the correct way to settle down, to calm themselves. You're not telling them they don't have a voice, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what we do. We say, calm down,
Mm-hmm.
be
Yeah.
quiet, you too
Yeah.
loud. And
Yeah.
it's like, we got to shift and, like you said, bring that restorative practice in. We also have to have real conversations with each other. We can't be afraid to not hear the other person, really hear what they're grieving about, really hear your students. They come from their experience. We can't get rid of that. And I think a lot of times we try to do a one size fit all, and it doesn't. You have so many people coming, students coming in with their experience. Hey, we as an educator,
Yeah.
we're coming in with our
Yeah.
experience.
Yes.
I can speak that when I did find you as well. I had just got a went to get my regular mammogram, and of course, through that winter break, they found something, and it's like I had to go through a biopsy. So imagine me showing up for my
Teaching.
students
Yeah.
and waiting on that process.
Oh my goodness.
That was heavy, but at the same time, I just stayed in constant prayer, and I had my circle. And then when I showed up for my students, I was like, just imagine what they go through. And
Yeah.
so if, I just kept bringing my energy, like my faith and energy had to show up for me every day. Was I fearful and scared? I'm going to be transparent and say, yes, I
Mm-hmm.
definitely, but
Yeah, of
did
course.
I let my faith walk ahead of me when I came through the door for my students? Because they were guaranteed every day to make me laugh, make me smile, sometimes make me tear up. And those are the things that kept me going. But definitely through Breathe for Change, just learning to breathe, learning to have conversations, learning to take care of me. You have to, as an educator, you have to carve out that space and
Yeah.
make it
Oh,
sacred. That
oh.
cannot be,
Mm-hmm.
it has
Mm-hmm.
to be a given. I don't care if it's
Yes.
5 minutes, 15 minutes before you
Yes.
walk in that classroom. And when you leave that classroom, it has to
Yeah.
be a sacred time that you are spending to recharge, because we're pouring out so much that we have to have. So Breathe for Change taught me that as well, to have make that space. And so I created this space in my bedroom as my yoga space, got my yoga mat. I,
Oh, look
uh,
at you.
I have my affirmations posted. And so it's that space is there to remind me that I need to stretch. I need to just even
Mhm.
just sit there and breathe. Um,
Mhm.
that you have to do.
Oh my goodness, Cheryl, you're giving me so much that I want to follow up on. But one of the first things I want to follow up, and I'll do it for the the mental health of those listening and myself included. You shared a little bit about your health journey. I just want to ask, are you okay? Were those results okay? Just because
Yes,
we're on
yes,
edge here, like, is it Cheryl okay? Are you okay? Is
yeah,
everything fine?
yes.
Okay.
It came back. That it, they're gonna keep a watch, but it came back.
Okay.
And it was, okay. Yeah, it
Okay.
wasn't cancerous.
I'm sorry. And it's totally
Oh
your,
no,
a
no,
private subject you don't have to share. But I know for me, I'm on
no.
edge here. Like, is she okay? Okay. All right, Miss Cheryl. Well, thank you for that. And you're not the first to talk about these health issues and how they affect our daily work, right? We had Kayla Whitson join us. I want to say it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and
Yeah.
she talked about how during her pregnancy she had a couple of complications. Um, preeclampsia, I think it
Yeah.
was, that some of us get, or some women get during pregnancy, and she happened to have had it. And then you're still expected to show up to work, to show up as your
Mhm.
best version. And of course you want to be the best version, because you brought up something that is so dear to a lot of us in education, and that is a student. They're the reason why a lot of us choose not to leave. They are the reason we show
Yeah.
up. I try to share this quote anytime I'm around educators, because I think it resonates. But Frederick Douglass said, "It is easier to raise strong children than to repair broken men." And
Mm.
I think for a lot of us, I know for myself, that's the reason. They're the reason I showed up every day, because I was like, I want to build strong children. I
Mhm.
want to do that instead of having to repair broken men in a system later, right? So
Mhm.
you talk about the students being your source of energy and maybe power during that time. And I think in terms of wellness, right, it's great to speak about that, because our students do bring so much of the energy that helps us keep going in the profession. But then you also mentioned something that is beautiful, because I know when people join these lives, what they want to know is action steps. Like, what action can I take today to start helping me tomorrow? And you said carve out the space. And you
Yeah.
also said create a space, right? So
Yes.
we were saying this in our workshop that we just finished, but we said what gets scheduled gets done,
Yes.
right? If
Yes.
you're not scheduling time to heal here, right? If you're not scheduled time to be well here, you cannot expect something to grow, right?
Mhm.
You cannot
No.
expect something to heal. So tell me more about that. Have you adopted, let's say, like a practice or a schedule, or what does that look like for you? Is it in the morning before you get to work?
Yes.
Is it while you're in, like, before the students come in your own classroom? Like, how do you carve the time? Can you tell us more about that?
So it goes back to when I first found you. I was already doing carving time out, but um after a series of conversations and spending time with you, trying to figure out, was I going to leave? So
Mhm.
I had to bring that in. I had to be intentional about reflecting on that. I had to be intentional to look back at my unique background. and bring that in. And so, as through that reflection, I was able to narrow down, oh, this is where I'm at. Like this is what I'm passionate about. This is part of my healing,
Mhm.
social emotional self-awareness,
Mhm.
managing myself, responsible decision
Mhm.
making, relationships building. Um, that's who that's what I've been practicing
Mhm.
as an educator. And so yes, I'm very intentional about my morning routine. And so I usually read a couple of pages in the morning.
Mhm.
I'm definitely intentional about my prayer life. And because that is just, whatever you consider to be your spiritual background,
Mhm.
and you definitely should be carving out a space for that. And
Yeah.
so for me, I've always carved a space out for my prayer life. I've
Mhm.
carved a space out as an educator to keep a top of trend.
Mhm.
And so, yes, I have definitely did that. And so, being intentional about that space brought a lot of reflection,
Mhm.
a lot of meditation time. And so,
Yeah.
yes, I'm very intentional about carving my space out. And if you got to write it on the calendar, and for
Yes.
it to pop up on your Google
Yes.
calendar,
Yes.
whatever
Something.
you whatever
Yeah.
you do to remind yourself, that's space that you should not
Mhm.
give up or trade for anything else.
Yeah.
Even if
Yeah.
you and I've been known to take myself early in the morning on the way to work, and stop
Mhm.
by my one of my neighborhood coffee shops, because
Mhm.
I like to visit different coffee shops and check
Mm.
out the atmosphere.
The vibes.
So yes, the vibe. And so
How is that?
I love a good vibe in a coffee
Yeah.
shop.
Same. Same. Same.
And so I mean, I get my cup. I'm a big fan of chai tea lattes, and so
Yay.
I get my hot chai tea latte, and even if I just listen to my favorite song, and or read my favorite
Yeah.
affirmation or scripture,
Yep.
that gives
Yep.
me the boost. But I've been intentional about bringing it into my classroom space.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so I'm a big fan of jazz. And
Oh.
so what I do is I'm intentional about getting to school at least 10 to 15 minutes early. I'm ahead of letting my students in the classroom, is because I don't want to rush into the classroom, be in a state of being
Yes.
rushed. I like to
Yes.
bring a calm energy. So I
Yeah.
will hook up my laptop, pull up my whiteboard, and I will have like a video playing with, background music.
Yep.
And I just make sure that the room is prepared. So when the
Mhm.
students walk in, they already sense a sense of
Yeah.
calmness.
Yes.
They
Yes.
don't sense me being rushed, or sense me being on edge. And that's the time that I have breathed and said, okay, they coming.
Ah, do they practice breathing with you
Oh,
or
yes, yes, we
yeah?
practice.
Awesome.
I'm intentional, just like I'm intentional about putting it on my schedule. When I
Mhm.
make my classroom schedule, that is
Mhm.
something I don't trade. I make sure we have a movement break. I make sure that
I
we
love that.
have what's called a calm break. And during the
Mhm.
calm break, they cannot use any technology. They have to choose to do a book. They can choose to put their head down, but they can choose to color, what
Wow.
what is attracted to them, and I let them choose, but they know no kind of like toys. They can have like a little sensory thing that they may have on their desk, but they can't go to the toy area to pull out any toys, because I don't want them to see it as just another break to play. I want
Yeah.
them to see it as this is an intentional self-awareness break, because they just came from like their specials time, which could be PE, which could be music. And a lot of
Mhm.
times with the PE, they played a game and they're already their energy level is up. So what I want to do
Mhm.
is get them to get used to transitions. How do I transition to the next activity? And
Mm-hmm.
so being intentional about putting a calm break
Yep.
on my schedule, they know it's coming every day.
Okay. Gotcha. Hi, Miss Cheryl. I'm writing down notes because I think that, and my thing's telling me that I'm running out of battery, but um, I wish that this was all information that I would have heard and that any new teacher hears, because I
Yeah,
remember for me, when I was first in the classroom, those first 2 years, it was a circus in my class. And I say that maybe circus is not the right word, but it was chaos
yes.
because I didn't have a routine in place. I was doing the best I could with what I had, right? But
Mhm.
classroom management, and you talked about self-management and how you kind of marry the two, right?
Yes.
Self-management with class management and the power of bringing those two together. I wish somebody would have coached me or mentored me on that. Something that one of my aunts says that I love, and it kind of goes hand with what you just said, is when you feel overwhelmed, the controllable. Control the controllable, right? In education, I think something I know that for myself, I found overwhelming is how much was beyond my control, right? The
Mhm.
district initiatives beyond my
Yep.
control, the admin that just got hired to work in our building out of my control, the amount of trainings that we are forced to go to out of
Mm.
my control, my interrupted PLCs out of my control. There's so much in education
Yeah,
that's out of our control. And I think that's where the frustration stems from,
it
right? It's
is.
like we're adults, we're professionals, yet we're treated like children. So
Mhm.
much is decided for
For
us,
us, yes.
right? That we cannot control the uncontrollable. So,
Mhm.
what I love about your advice is you're talking about self management, right? When
Yes.
I cannot control external situations, I'll control what I can, which is me
Mhm.
and my response, right? I know that maybe some of you have heard this, but there's a saying that life is 20% what happens and 80% how we
How you
respond,
respond to it.
right? And the advice you're giving, I mean, I wrote it down because I was like, I think we need to break it up for those listening, right? But you talked about the management of self, starting with your routine of just you alone by yourself. You start with reading, praying, and making time for meditation. And you said, that's your faith-based kind of approach, but whatever faith other people might
Yeah.
have, you have to carve out time to respect that, right? And manage that time to say,
Mhm.
this is going to be my golden time for this. In business, we call the hour where we get to do our most valuable work, we call it tiger time. Like, this is tiger time. Like, nobody can bother me during tiger time. I'm
Mhm.
defending it like a tiger. Like, no, you don't have space in my schedule during these hours, right? Or during these minutes, because I'm
Mhm.
defending that time where my mind is sharpest or best, and I'm getting the work done. I think this could be like, we need to make up a word, Miss Cheryl, for tiger time, but like for this kind of routine that you talked about in the morning,
Yeah.
right? But I love that the first step you talked about is management of self, and then management of classroom and how you weave those two together. Something so small as coming before the students to set the tone for the day, right,
Mhm.
can really make the difference in the way the school day goes with them. So you talked about getting there early, turning on some jazz music, coming up, showing up already relaxed because you carved out tiger time for yourself, right? And how that kind of communicates and transfers into them. Such beautiful things. You're setting the tone, and you are again controlling the controllable. You cannot control how the students' mornings at home went, but you can control how they arrive to your classroom, right? In a setting
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
lot more receptive, right, of how they're
Mhm.
doing. I love this. And you did talk about, doing some breathing exercises. Could you model for us like any breathing exercises that you might do? I noticed you said like 3 times breathing in, breathing out, but
So
is there anything in particular that you want to model for us?
yeah, so basically just, even how you sit up in your chair, like
Oh,
being intentional, to, set up in your chair, making sure your feet is on the floor.
Mhm.
You can choose to gaze, find something to gaze, or I tell my students if they feel like closing their eyes, they can. A lot of times you don't know what trauma students have been through, so you have to be, let them choose if they want to gaze off into some or close their eyes. And
Mhm.
so then I have them to, you know, take in a breath, you can feel your stomach and you can feel your chest rise. And then I go, release it. It's like a
Mhm.
balloon filling up. And then I say
Mhm.
again, then just
Nose
let
or
it out.
mouth, does it matter?
I tell them to take the breath in through their nose. And when they take the breath in through their nose rather than their mouth, they will feel their belly and chest rising up. It's a difference if I go, and you feel
Yeah,
like you're
and your
straining.
throat, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
tight. You don't want that. You want them to practice breathing in through taking the air in through their nose.
Mhm.
Another thing that I use on my students is like take 5. Okay, we need to take 5. And
Mhm.
take 5 is we're going to stop what we're doing and take 5 deep breaths. So,
Mhm.
and then we actually count. That's 1, that's 2,
Mhm.
we count through it, and they will remind me sometime I want to do take 5 if they're very upset, because it
Yeah.
becomes a language.
Yeah.
It's you have to teach it.
Mhm.
We go along, and we know this as educators.
Mhm.
We model it. We have to explicitly teach social skills, just
Yeah.
like we have to be explicit and
Mhm.
teaching our reading skills, math skills, academics. You have to be explicit in teaching social emotional skills.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
a lot of times people like, what is this? Is this just another buzzword? Is just another
Mm.
thing to do on our list? What is it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you have to shift. Like I always had a program coordinator say, Miss Randle, do the heavy lifting on the front end for classroom management. And you
Mhm.
will see that you don't have to try to do that heavy lifting on the end when the chaos starts.
And
We
isn't that the truth? Isn't
yeah,
that the truth? Yeah, it
so
starts and ends with classroom management.
yes,
Yeah.
and so we want to
Yeah.
jump into learning that first week and two, because everybody's on us about this has to be
Mhm.
done. But
Mhm.
the thing that I can control is the tone that I set in my classroom. And so
Yeah.
for me, I'm intentional about we're being explicit about classroom routines, because
Mhm.
if a student knows what's going to happen next, if they know where I should be, if they know that if I don't have the proper materials, how do I ask for those materials? If I'm feeling emotional, how can I express that? And I think
Mhm.
a lot of times we always want to go with how are you doing today? They may not
Mhm.
know that, but if you ask them, how's your weather? Give us a weather report today.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they may be able to say, well, I'm feeling like a storm is going on. I
Yeah.
feel sunny outside. I
Yeah.
feel partly cloudy. And so you're teaching science, but you're also
Mhm.
teaching a social emotional
That
skill.
cross-curricular connection, right?
Yes.
That everybody wants to know.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I hadn't
So
thought about that, but you're right.
you
You're
can bring
right.
social emotional into
Yeah. And
science.
even tell them to make a writing, like a one
Yeah.
sentence that describes
Yes.
your feeling. Now there's
Yeah.
writing component in there too.
Yeah.
That's
You
amazing.
can. And so you think of just I think that's where we're at. I think I can speak personally for me that
Mhm.
we have to wake up and see that the education
Mhm.
system is
Mhm.
changing. Our
Yeah.
students are coming from different places. And so it's no longer one size fit all. It's no longer where a
Yeah.
student can sit all day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we have to revisit that. We have
Mhm.
to revisit what are the ways we can teach them how to cope with the
Yeah.
way society is changing. I mean, the pandemic did, woo, look at what we had to go through with the pandemic. So I feel like it can't be business as usual. It's like
Yeah.
that changed us. So how
Yeah.
can we change with that?
Yeah. No, and one thing that we talked about in my 5-day challenge that directly correlates with what you're saying is we talked about the goose with the golden eggs, right? If you remember that fable,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it's a farmer or someone who finds
Yeah.
this goose and they think to themselves, I'll be rich forever, right? So they are like, patiently waiting for that egg of the next day, and then
Yeah.
when it gets there, they're like, I can't wait for tomorrow's egg, and I can't wait. And suddenly they grow so impatient with having to
Mm-hmm.
wait that they just try to open up the goose and they realize there's no eggs, right? Because
Yeah.
you killed the goose of the golden eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So we are the goose that lays the golden eggs. And if we don't take care of ourselves, right? If we don't carve out
Mm-hmm.
that time to be intentional, to say, I, like you said, we went through so much during COVID. We've gone through so much as educators over the last couple of years. Like, if we don't defend the goose of the golden egg, who will?
Who
Right.
will?
So,
Yeah.
with that said, Miss Cheryl, we'll start making time here for Q&A in just a minute, but let's talk a little bit about boundaries, because I think those are so important. Which kind of before, let's pause before we talk about boundaries. I just wanted to highlight and say and celebrate you, because the work that you're doing with students, are the population of students that you work with, you said, are autistic, right? They have autism, and to get them to kind of have these practices, that just tells us that we can all incorporate this
Oh
into
yeah.
our routines. I
Yeah.
mean, and if you're seeing results with this population, we can see results with all students, and all
Yeah.
of them benefit from this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I love that you are, intentional about promoting these practices with them. Now, one thing that a lot of our teachers are nervous about as they're coming back, right? Again, they don't have job offers. They were hoping to get them. Some of them, like you, have decided, no, I just really do love this profession. I've decided to stay. Um, there's admin. Sometimes there's an idea that we have in our head about how we will defend our time, our tiger time, right? And then admin will come and be like, interrupt, right? You
Mm.
might show up early to get your classroom set up, to create that safe space for you and your students. Or maybe you carve out time, let's say during a break that you might have, to maybe do some of the practices, and then admin might come in, like, or just life, right? How do you create safe boundaries to continue to make these practices a priority? How would you say? I mean, you're going to become a district administrator, or you're already a district administrator,
No.
right?
Well, actually, I am moving into a role of special education behavior interventionist. And so
Intervention.
it will be at the district level. I will have
Amazing.
about 9 campuses where I will go and visit. I will have referrals from that campus to come support the teacher and the student.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be, the student can be in a self-contained self-education, special education classroom,
Mm-hmm.
or they are going out to do inclusion into their general education classroom. And I want to say that to those who are listening and who are special educators, just always remember that special education is a service and not a place. And I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times if we can remember that it's a service and not a place, like we're not,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you belong in this classroom because you have this disability. No, it is a service that we're providing to the student so that they can have a free and appropriate education, and they can have a well-rounded education. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think if we have to keep shifting the narrative of
Mm-hmm.
what has gone on in past practices and begin to build and restore
Mm-hmm.
upon new practices. And so I always tell educators that I help is remember that student deserves to be there.
Yeah.
They deserves to be known as a student that belongs, and you have to do what is necessary. They may not learn the same way, but we can definitely still hold high expectations for that student. As far as boundaries, that's just it. Uh, Having these conversations. I was fortunate to have a good admin, and they really liked that I had married the two of self-management and classroom management. They saw I was intentional about creating that space. Well, I would invite them. Like, I'm like, hey, we're come to our calm down set break, come to our yoga break, come in and actually
Oh,
see
the value, right?
the
Like see the
value of
value.
it and actually see the kids
Love
how
that.
they settle and how they enjoy. I
Mhm.
would invite them to our morning meetings because I was intentional about before I open up the day to the students. We had a few minutes of coming together and giving a check-in on how they're doing. And so
Mhm.
I would be intentional to invite them to that. If they walked in and we were on a break that wasn't on the count on the schedule, I would just keep going. I'm like, okay, we needed this. We needed a
Mhm.
calm down break.
Yeah.
And so and invite them to understand that whenever we would have our meetings, that would be something I would bring up is like sometimes we have to take those breaks that are not planned. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to take a few minutes yourself. So
Yeah.
think about they can't go all day like that.
Yes.
And then whenever I had meetings with my admin to go over a lesson plan, to go over when they were going to observe me, I would make that has to be, you have to see that because this is
Mhm.
important to me. So
I love that.
you have to, for me, I always incorporated it into it that you may see this in my classroom, and I'm big on the breathe and I'm big on the calm down. So you may see me introduce a little piece of social skills right before I jump into the lesson. So I think just creating those spaces where you can have that conversation, and if they don't receive it at first, bring it again. It's like it's
Yeah.
like that's you're saying
Right.
I'm in control of how I manage me. And I this is something that I can't just let go of. I will definitely take in coaching and
Mhm.
opinion. And but then again, I have to be in this classroom, and so
Yeah.
I have to make it my own.
Yes, exactly. And be given permission to do that, right?
Yes,
Because it's a lot of the times it's like you don't. But I think that's the best advice anyone could give. And I'm so glad you share it, Cheryl, because having these boundaries with our administrators is sometimes very hard,
yeah,
right?
it is.
And I love that you said invite them. Invite
Yeah,
them to the table, allow and bring them to the table and allow them to experience why this is so important, because
yes.
I agree. I think once they can see the value of what you're doing, they'll be a lot more likely to defend your tiger time too.
Mhm.
And, the fact that our administrators are they have, what do you call it, they're motivated by numbers and data, right?
Yes.
Maybe it might even be smart to be like, since we started doing these practices, our
Uh-huh.
student engagement, our student score went up by like this
Yes.
percentage, right? Because our admin is always like, oh, the student score go up, okay, then we're keeping that, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes maybe trying to see the data and triangulate it to,
Yes.
okay, since we started these practices, this is what has happened, and show it with data.
Mhm.
Maybe that will create a better boundary and respect between the admin and us with
Yes.
these practices. But your knowledge has been invaluable. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I just love that you're leaving teachers with a gem of information that they can immediately put into use as they go back to the classroom. Some of them are excited, to see
Yes.
those shiny bright faces that we love to see, and meeting those new kiddos that we are going to be supporting throughout the year. But
Yes.
some of them, I was reading on one post, within the first 24 hours of coming back, we're already having like panic attacks and
Yes. Oh,
things
yeah.
like that. And we don't want that. We want to
Mm-mm.
give them tools to have success in the classroom. So
Yeah.
sometimes that means they want to stay. Again, the goal here is to just find joy and fulfillment in our careers. And if your
Yes.
career continues to be in education, we want you to continue to find joy and fulfillment, and
Mhm.
sometimes it involves these practices. So
Yeah.
Cheryl, thank you so much. At this time,
Oh,
we're
well.
gonna pause and we're gonna ask if Gauri might happen to have questions. Just kind of as a background, I know Gauri's background is more in graphic design, but if you do, you mind me sharing, Gauri? Is that okay? Yeah, awesome. So Gauri is she was looking for a career shift, and she attended a job of an edtech job fair not too long ago, and realized, hey, my future might be in edtech because there's so much meaning behind the work that we do, right? We support students and teachers, and we have a lot of drive in our work because we know it produces outcomes for others. And she's kind of considering this whole idea of working in ed tech. And I think she might be trying to get into the world of what happens behind the scenes, right? What happens in the classrooms, what kind of challenges we're facing. And this is one of the things that we face as educators, right? Is that balance of
Yeah.
mental health, of like management and controlling the controllable. So
Mhm.
I think she left a message in the chat.
Yes, she said, I'm especially excited about today's session because I'm working on a design project around special ed. Wow, yes. I feel like when we tune ourselves to the universe and say yes, things just start aligning and finding us. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So Miss Cheryl and you found each other. That's amazing.
And
And
I
Miss
would be happy to collaborate. Definitely, I'm a anything that can help the special education, anything there, yes. But definitely when we open ourselves up, and that is a part of Breathe for Change as well, is just opening ourselves up to the energy and giving up that you're not giving control up, but you're saying I can't control everything.
exactly,
So
exactly.
it goes
Yeah.
back to what you said, being in control of the things we can control. And I
Mhm.
know that, we're some have to return back to the classroom and they don't have a position yet, but that doesn't mean you give up. That doesn't mean
Mhm.
you still reflect, you still keep going and working on those pieces. And then
Mhm.
once you see all those pieces come together.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you don't continue the work, but you
Mhm.
do some self-reflection, self-management,
Yeah.
and being intentional with you and
Yeah.
controlling the things that you can control, and then you will see the shift.
Yes. No, definitely. And it's true, Cheryl. It's not always just about control. Sometimes it's about surrender, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, sometimes it's about surrender. And yoga, Gauri just said like that she's also a yogi. She
yeah,
is a fellow practitioner, and yoga does teach you a lot about surrendering, about releasing
yes,
and letting go, right? So
yeah,
it's kind of a balancing act, letting go of the things you cannot control, kind of
yeah.
like the prayer of the AA meetings, right? Like give me
Mhm.
the serenity to
Yes,
accept the things I cannot
and I
change.
can, yes,
Yes, right. The courage to change the things I
yes, I
can,
can.
and the wisdom to know the
Know the
difference.
difference.
I
Yeah.
think maybe that will become the teacher's prayer too, because
Woo.
we're thinking like that. It's like, grant me the serenity. There's things we can't control in
It's
education, right?
yeah,
They're
yeah.
above us. It's a system. It's a
It
systemic
yes,
problem. We can't
yes,
control that, but we can control inside, right?
yes,
So
yes.
let's work on that. Your advice, again, and I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, but it's just highly valuable, and we appreciate the fact that you shared all of these amazing jewels of information. I do highly encourage anyone listening or who might watch the replay later to take her up on that challenge, to carve out time for self-management, and to then make the intention to practice classroom management and marry those two together and try to observe the difference, right?
Yes.
um, I think Gaudi said, I'm a huge believer in that philosophy as well. And it's so nice to hear you both along the same lines. Control what you can control, change what you can change. That right there, I think, wraps up this meeting,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I think that's the message that you brought with us. And I'm so excited. Gaudi did point out that she connected with you on LinkedIn.
Yes.
So
Yes.
maybe there's something there that can happen between a collaboration, like you said, because you
Oh,
said something today that was powerful. You said special education is a service, not a place.
mm,
And a lot of the views that we have on special ed need to change. And you're a great advocate for that, Ms. Cheryl. So,
thank you. I enjoyed it. It was a good conversation.
yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. I will be putting this on our email list. We have over 100 40 participants or 40 people signed up to receive this kind of
Okay.
communication. So we're looking forward to having them learn from you. Thank you so much, Miss Cheryl, for giving us of your time and wisdom today. We
Thank
appreciate you.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Until we meet again, my friends, take care.
All right. Thank you.
Bye bye.